So, for about 500 years now, Machiavelli's The Prince has been held up as, like, the ultimate ruthless playbook for power.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you hear it everywhere.
Right, like you hear it referenced in boardrooms, in political commentary, pop culture. It's basically treated as this definitive, cold-blooded manual for anyone who, wants to conquer their world and keep it.
Yeah, a complete how-to guide for villains,
Yeah.
essentially.
But what if, and this is what we're really digging into today, what if the greatest how-to guide for power is actually just a list of impossible contradictions, like a list that will inevitably destroy anyone who actually tries to use it?
And that is exactly the premise we are interrogating in this deep dive, because today we are looking at translative excerpts from The Prince, right alongside another piece Machiavelli wrote, which is The Life of Castruccio Castracani.
Right.
And our mission here is to really look past that notorious reputation these texts have. We want to examine the actual, internal mechanics of his arguments. Basically, we're looking for the structural cracks in the armor.
Yeah, because when you actually sit down and read the source material,
Yeah.
the advice isn't, it's not nearly as clean or binary as people assume.
Not at all.
Highly, highly conflicted. It's like he's
Right.
trying to apply this rigid mathematical formula to
Right.
human nature. And, human psychology just does not bend that way.
It really doesn't.
So let's just jump straight into what might actually be the most glaring philosophical tension in the entire book. It's this massive gap between what Machiavelli demands a leader must do versus what he openly admits human beings are, like, actually capable of doing.
Yeah, the shapeshifter versus the unchanging man. We see this most clearly when we look at his advice on adaptability. So, particularly in chapter 18, Machiavelli uses this ancient myth of Chiron the centaur to explain his point.
The half man, half horse, or half beast, rather.
Exactly, half man, half beast. And he uses this to say that a prince has to know how to use both natures. Because, fighting by the law is the way of men, but because the law is often completely insufficient, a prince must also know how to fight by force, which is the way of beasts.
And he gets super specific about the beast part, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he doesn't just say be an animal. He says a ruler must be both the fox and the lion.
Yes, the lion to terrify the wolves and the fox to recognize the traps.
Right, right.
And the sources really highlight this demand for total, absolute psychological flexibility. He advises that a prince shouldn't necessarily possess all the good virtues, like mercy, faith, humanity, religion.
Because actually having them and sticking to them will ruin you.
Exactly. But you absolutely must appear to have them. So you have to preach peace and good faith publicly while keeping your mind, and he puts it this way, ready to turn itself to the exact opposite when the winds of fortune shift.
Which is wild. And he holds up Pope Alexander VI as like the ultimate master of this trait, right?
Oh, yeah. Alexander VI was a man who, according to Machiavelli at least, did absolutely nothing but deceive people. I mean, he swore these massive oaths that he never, ever intended to keep. But he succeeded because he just deeply understood the foundational gullibility of mankind. He could just wear whatever mask the specific situation required. So Machiavelli is basically arguing that the ideal ruler is this ultimate shapeshifter, a chameleon who feels absolutely no internal friction when pivoting from, extreme piety to extreme ruthlessness.
Okay, but I have to challenge this premise,
Mm-hmm.
just based on the text itself, because the sources completely contradict this exact demand just a few chapters later.
Oh, they definitely do.
Right. In chapter 25, Machiavelli starts talking about fortune.
Mm.
And he explores why certain rulers succeed or fail based on what he calls the spirit of the times. And the example he leans on heavily here is Pope Julius II.
Yes, Julius II. He was famously impetuous, like incredibly aggressive.
Right.
He launched this military enterprise against Bologna with such unhinged boldness that he basically paralyzed the King of Spain and the Venetians, and he essentially forced the King of France into an alliance.
Which was a massive success for him.
A brilliant success. But, and here is the crucial observation Machiavelli makes, Julius succeeded only because his naturally aggressive, impetuous nature perfectly matched the specific circumstances of that exact historical moment.
And right there, that is the fatal crack in the armor. Because Machiavelli explicitly writes that if the times had suddenly changed and required caution, Julius would have been completely ruined.
Yep, he wouldn't have been able to adapt.
Right. And why? Because, to quote the text literally, a man cannot deviate from what nature inclines him to do.
It's a huge admission.
It is. We are creatures of habit. If you have always succeeded by being aggressive, you can't suddenly just wire your brain to be cautious. So, I mean, think about the mechanics of this for a second, right? It's like telling someone that to survive in their career, you must be a world-class heavyweight boxer on Tuesday and then an Olympic gold medalist figure skater on Wednesday.
That's a great way to put it.
Like, if human beings cannot fundamentally alter their innate, hardwired dispositions, which Machiavelli freely admits with Julius II, then how can he simultaneously demand that a prince become this fluid, shape-shifting fox lion?
Yeah.
Isn't the core requirement of his whole playbook a psychological impossibility?
You have isolated the tragic flaw in his entire model of leadership right there. The text demands infinite psychological flexibility just to survive the chaos of, 16th century Italy. You literally have to be able to turn your very soul on a dime.
Right.
But Machiavelli, the observer, the actual man who spent his entire life analyzing human behavior, he knows perfectly well that people do not work that way. We are totally bound by our dispositions.
Yeah.
And this tension is never resolved in the text. He has constructed this theoretically perfect ruler who simply cannot exist in biological reality.
Which basically fundamentally undermines the whole premise of the book as a practical manual.
Exactly.
He is demanding a level of cognitive control over one's own nature that he secretly knows is a total myth. So, okay, if we accept that perfect adaptability is impossible and that rulers are going to naturally default to their innate tendencies, let's look at what actually happens when a prince leans really heavily into the lion persona.
Okay, yeah.
Like when they use extreme force. How do they navigate Machiavelli's advice on violence? Because this reveals another massive contradiction in what we could probably call the cruelty calculus.
Oh, the cruelty calculus is just a fascinating area of the text. To really understand the mechanics of this, we have to analyze how Machiavelli contrasts two specific historical figures. Agathocles, the Sicilian from chapter 8, and Cesare Borgia from chapter 7 and 17.
Right.
Because both of these men utilized extreme, horrific violence to secure their states, but Machiavelli judges them entirely differently.
Right. So assuming, the basic history here, Agathocles essentially orchestrates this mass slaughter of the Syracuse elites just to seize power.
Right, a complete bloodbath.
Yeah. But Machiavelli condemns him for it. He states that this kind of unmitigated cruelty, this total lack of faith and mercy, it may gain empire, but not glory. Like, Agathocles gets the power, sure, but he is denied the title of a truly excellent man.
Right. Now, contrast that condemnation with his treatment of Cesare Borgia, who is, without a doubt, the central hero of The Prince.
Yeah, he loves Borgia.
He really does. But Borgia also deployed staggering violence. When Borgia took control of the Romagna region, it was completely lawless. It was chaotic. He needed to pacify it. So he installs this enforcer, a guy named Ramiro Dorco.
Okay.
And he gives him absolute authority to crush the lawlessness with extreme severity. And Ramiro succeeds, but his brutal methods predictably cause the populace to absolutely hate him.
And Machiavelli is very, very clear in chapter 19 about this. The absolute worst thing a prince can do, the one single thing that guarantees ruin, is to become hated by the people. You can be feared, that's fine, but you must absolutely avoid hatred. So Borgia has this massive problem now. He used this enforcer to do all his dirty work, and now the hatred is bubbling up and it might transfer to him.
Exactly. And Borgia's solution to this is just a masterclass in dark psychological manipulation. He has Ramiro arrested.
His own guy.
His own guy. And one morning, the people of Cesena wake up and discover Ramiro's body sliced completely in half in the public square.
Wait, literally sliced in half?
Literally bifurcated, sliced in half, left in the piazza with a block of wood and a bloody knife right beside him.
Oh, my.
Yeah. And Machiavelli writes that the barbarity of the spectacle left the people satisfied and dismayed, and he praises Borgia endlessly for this. He considers it a glorious act.
Okay, I really need to pause on that mechanism because this is where the advice just seems to completely short-circuit.
How so?
Well, Machiavelli condemns Agathocles for killing elites to secure power, saying it denies him glory.
Right.
But Borgia literally slices his own minister in half in a public square, leaving this, horror movie scene for the citizens to wake up to. And this is considered a glorious way to avoid hatred.
It is a wild juxtaposition.
I really want you to unpack the psychology here for a second. How does leaving half a human body in the town square not immediately violate the fundamental rule to avoid hatred?
It's a great question, and it hinges on a very fragile, very subtle psychological distinction Machiavelli tries to draw. He differentiates between cruelties that are properly used and those that are badly employed.
Okay.
So Agathocles used violence primarily for selfish ambition, and critically, his violence would theoretically need to continue to maintain his grip. It was this lingering, ongoing threat.
Ah, I see.
Borgia's cruelty, however, was a closed loop.
A closed loop. Explain how that works on the minds of the everyday citizens.
Sure. So when the people saw Romero sliced in half, they were dismayed because the sheer power and brutality of the act instilled absolute fear of Borgia. But they were simultaneously satisfied because Romero was the one who had been ruthlessly oppressing them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Borgia effectively scapegoated his own enforcer. He absorbed all the credit for the region's newfound peace while violently purging the instrument of their misery. It was cruelty done all at once, in a single spectacular blow. Machiavelli argues that if violence is not repeated, the public doesn't continually taste it. Therefore, it inspires awe and fear, but the hatred dies with the scapegoat.
But just look at the impossible precision that requires.
It's incredibly precise.
You are demanding a ruler calculate the exact psychological breaking point of an entire population. It assumes you can perfectly, flawlessly predict how a mob will interpret a bloody spectacle.
Which is very risky.
Exactly. If the public wakes up and sees Romero sliced in half and instead of feeling satisfied, they decide, hey, Borgia is an unpredictable monster who might do the same thing to us. The whole plan collapses.
Instant.
One miscalculation in this cruelty calculus, just one execution that doesn't resonate perfectly with the public mood, and you cross the line from feared to hated.
And if you cross that line, Machiavelli is explicit about the consequences. No fortress can save you.
Men.
You are entirely dependent on manipulating public perception with surgical violence while fully knowing that human mobs are inherently volatile and unpredictable. It is an incredibly precarious framework for maintaining power.
Which really brings us to the ultimate question of the text. Let's just say, hypothetically, a ruler actually pulls this off.
Okay.
They manage the impossible task of perfectly adapting their nature, and they miraculously calculate the violence without ever crossing into hatred.
They thread the needle perfectly.
Right. Does this playbook actually guarantee a win?
And that is the illusion of control, which leads us directly into his philosophy on fortune versus human agency.
Right. Chapter 25.
Yes. In Chapter 25, Machiavelli introduces this very famous metaphor. He compares fortune to a raging river. When it floods, it just destroys everything in its path.
Sweeps away the trees, the buildings, everything.
Exactly. But he argues, during times of fair weather, men can build dams, barriers, and dikes. So when the floodwaters eventually rise, they are channeled and controlled.
So he's saying we aren't completely helpless.
Right. He desperately needs to carve out some space for human agency. So he concludes that fortune controls roughly half of our actions, but our free will, our preparation, our cunning, our virtue controls the other half.
He really wants to believe that if you just follow the manual, you can outsmart fate.
He does.
But let's look at the historical evidence he provides to actually back up this thesis. Let's look at his prime example, Cesare Borgia. If anyone built the dams and barriers perfectly, it was Borgia.
Oh, Borgia did everything the manual prescribes. Literally everything. He systematically eliminated all his rival factions. He consolidated his territory in the Romagna. He secured the absolute loyalty of the elites.
Right.
He essentially laid the perfect structural foundation for a lasting empire. He was entirely 100% prepared for the future.
But what actually happens, right at the critical moment, right when he is on the verge of cementing his power, independently of his father, Pope Alexander VI, the entire perfect system completely collapses.
It completely falls apart.
And it doesn't collapse because another prince outmaneuvered him or because his cruelty calculus failed.
No, it collapses due to what Machiavelli calls the extraordinary and extreme malignity of fortune.
Just terrible luck.
Terrible luck. His father suddenly dies of a fever. And at that exact same time, Borgia himself contracts the fever and is lying on his deathbed, totally surrounded by hostile armies.
Unbelievable.
And in this weakened, feverish state, his judgment just fails. He makes a crucial error. He allows Julius II, a man he had previously injured, to ascend to the papacy.
Which violates his own rule.
It entirely violates his own rule that you should never trust someone you've harmed just because you offer them new benefits.
I really want you to think about the staggering irony of this. The ultimate manual for political control, a book that demands absolute, rigid mastery over human nature and public perception is completely unraveled by, like, a microscopic bacteria.
Literal fever.
A fever destroys the perfect prince. And the crazy part is, this isn't even an isolated incident in Machiavelli's writing. Let's pull on the final source material we have, the life of Castruccio Castracani.
Yeah, Castruccio is presented as another one of these brilliant archetypes. He is the cunning, bold ruler of Lucca. He rises through pure military genius and sheer will.
A total force of nature.
Exactly, and he reaches the absolute apex of his career at the Battle of Fucecchio, where he uses brilliant terrain tactics to crush a massive Florentine army. He has achieved total victory. The dams against the raging river of fortune are fully built.
He has executed every single piece of Machiavellian advice flawlessly.
Flawlessly?
And how does his story end? I mean, he doesn't fall in some glorious final stand. He doesn't get outsmarted by a rival fox.
Yep.
He is standing at the gates of the city after the battle, covered in sweat, just waiting to greet his returning troops. And he catches a chill from the wind coming off the river.
A cold wind.
Just a wind. And that chill becomes a fever, and he is dead within days, leaving his state to a totally incompetent heir. The whole thing just falls apart.
So, I mean, I have to ask, why does Machiavelli even include these examples?
It's the ultimate question.
Right. If the entire premise of The Prince is that a brilliant ruler can control their destiny through calculated ruthlessness, doesn't the reality of Borgia and Castruccio completely obliterate that thesis?
It does. It creates this profound structural paradox within the text itself. Machiavelli desperately wants to write an instruction manual for control. But as a historian, he just cannot ignore the reality that ultimate control is a myth.
Yeah.
The historical evidence he insists on using, the very men he idolizes, prove that no matter how flawlessly you execute the strategy, no matter how perfectly you balance the lion and the fox, you are still entirely at the mercy of biology.
And a random chance. Exactly. A stiff breeze and a chill completely override the greatest strategic mind of a generation.
It makes the book feel almost self-defeating in a way.
Very much so.
When you look at the totality of what we've discussed today, The Prince really stops looking like a straightforward how-to guide for aspiring dictators. The cracks in the armor are everywhere.
Everywhere you look.
It demands that a leader become this fluid shapeshifter while openly acknowledging that humans are physically incapable of changing their innate nature. It asks leaders to deploy horrific, traumatizing violence, but somehow magically calculate the psychological fallout so perfectly that they don't inspire the hatred that will inevitably ruin them.
Right.
And it promises that cunning preparation can conquer destiny in a world where its own best examples are literally wiped out by random fevers.
Which really forces us to look at the context in which this book was actually written. We have to remember where Machiavelli was sitting when he actually penned these words.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
He wasn't in a position of power. He had been imprisoned, he was tortured, and he was completely exiled from his beloved Florence when the Medici family returned to rule.
He was living in forced retirement on a small farm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. He spent his days literally in the mud, arguing with local woodcutters and playing cards at the tavern. And at night, he would take off his dirty peasant clothes, put on his formal court dress, and sit alone at his desk to write.
Wow.
He was desperately trying to get a job in the new Medici administration. He dedicated this book to them as a demonstration of his political utility.
So he was literally submitting his resume to the people who exiled him.
Exactly.
But look at what is actually inside that resume, given all the impossible contradictions we've just unpacked. What if we've been misreading the genre of this book for 500 years? What if, whether he was fully conscious of it or not, Machiavelli didn't write an instruction manual? What if he wrote a tragedy?
It is a deeply compelling interpretation. When you stack up the psychological impossibility of the perfect prince, the razor-thin margin of the cruelty calculus, and the ultimate supremacy of blind fortune, the text reads very, very differently. It does. It reads like a showcase of the impossible, almost soul-crushing paradoxes required to try and force order onto a chaotic, broken world. It demonstrates that to seek ultimate control is to subject yourself to an impossible standard that will inevitably, biologically or psychologically, destroy you.
A tragedy disguised as an instruction manual that completely alters how you consume this advice.
It changes everything.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you look at the powerful people in your world, whether they are operating in politics, business, or the media, look past that confident exterior. See if you can spot who is currently caught in Machiavelli's impossible traps. Because as the text itself proves, no matter how perfectly you try to build your dams, eventually you have to answer to the river. See you next time.